Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. We are back with a plethora of topics. We've got a lot of things to get into. We're going to talk some playoff hockey, Stanley Cup final. We've got Ducks questions to get into. It's going to be a lot of fun. Jake, I hope you're ready for this.
I am. There may be even some random talk at the end that we may get into as you were opining about your fantasy football performance from this past weekend.
Opining is generous, more like weeping.
There you
but
go.
yeah, I'll accept that. Before we get into the day's topics, though, do you wanna spill the beans on a little bit of exciting news? Just maybe tease it.
Some exciting news. So as you may see, if you are in our Twitch stream right now, or if you are watching this on YouTube, you will have seen that on your screen is a Manscaped logo. And there's a code along with that. CTP, as you can imagine, stands for Crash the Pond. If you go to manscaped.com and buy anything from there, you can get 20% off plus free shipping by using that code. So we've partnered up with Manscaped. They've sent us some free stuff. The first official pods will be in a little bit where you'll get the full read from us going into our full experience. But I can say they have sent us the Lawnmower 3.0. And oh boy, it does the trick. And it's got some bells and whistles that I was not expecting that really make a difference. So, I mean, how was your experience so far, Felix?
So far, I have used the Lawnmower 3.0, and I'm really happy with it as someone who, has lawn to mow. It does the trick, the LED light, and usually when I use the like other name brand trimmers, I get like kind of irritation, and I haven't gotten that at all using the lawnmower. So I'm really happy with it so far.
Definitely. It's a fantastic product. You'll probably hear more about it from us in the future, but for now, that's it. Just go, and if you want some 20% off, go check it out. Manscaped.com. Use the code CTP for 20% off.
Yeah, you're getting a good deal. 20% off is pretty significant, and you're also supporting your favorite podcast. So
that is true.
I don't know what else I really need to say there. Just go and do it. CTP, that's the code. Okay, let's get into some topics that we've got submitted. We went to Twitter. Obviously, everyone knows right now that the Ducks are kind of, we're in a bit of this is the low point for the Ducks right now in terms of things to talk about. There is just not a whole lot going on.
It's been a while since we've had some news, although it's going to come fast and heavy come October, but for now, we're kind of in this. Almost feels like the dead days of August in terms of news from a typical offseason where free agent frenzy has happened. You've had the week or two afterwards. No trades are really happening, and it's just basically all of the reporters are up at their cottages, and it's all quiet on the all quiet. And so, I mean, that's kind of how it feels from a Ducks perspective right now, even though you have the Cup final going on.
Yes, and for the Ducks, there's definitely a lot of action that's going to come our way very quickly. There's going to be the draft. Free agency is going to arrive. The season is going to start back up. We don't necessarily know when that will be, but with things will get really interesting really quickly. But for right now, we're kind of at the tail end of this, I would say. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But I went to Twitter, of course, and people delivered some good questions, some good topics to get into. Let's start with one from our very own Ginger Wolf asking, question, would Anaheim have been a contending team these past few years if they had drafted Pastrnak 10th overall? So if the Ducks had drafted David Pastrnak, are they a contender right now? If we just take that question at face value, does David Pastrnak being injected into the current Ducks roster have them as contenders?
Well, I think a good way to look at that would be to look at something in the sense of Evolving Hockey's goals above replacement model and see kind of where that goals above replacement model will put them in. I'll pull that up and get that exact information for us so we have that. In my opinion, before even looking at that, I would say no, it doesn't make the Ducks a contender right now. It may have pushed them to the level of being in the race. They probably would have been in the 2014 playoffs that happened this past season. But I don't think they would necessarily be contending.
Yeah. Well, so the thing with David Pastrnak, at least in the last 3 years, is that he and if you look specifically at last season, this past season, for example, he is an elite, and I mean elite power play player. He has that incredible shot. He has that deceptive puck handling ability. He has that very quick and lethal release, and that makes him a weapon on the power play. He is the best power play player in the NHL right now. A lot of people might think it's Ovechkin, and he's right up there, but David Pastrnak is the best, to me, the best shooter in the NHL right now. There's some numbers that kind of go into that with expected goals, shooting percentage from different ranges. To me, at least, I think he's the very best shooter. But that doesn't really translate at 5-on-5 in terms of his on ice impact. If you like, you were bringing up evolving hockey, his metrics at 5-on-5 are kind of lackluster, and maybe what the way that models are currently constructed, where they might not capture what David Pastrnak does so well. Who knows? Because over the last 3 years, his actual goals scored output on ice has been exceptional, but the expected goals has been nowhere near that. So is he just one of those guys who kind of breaks those models? Who knows? But if you just look at pure shot attempt volume, it's not great. The Bruins don't actually generate kind of above break even shot attempts with him on the ice. They are, a little better. They're pretty good defensively, but he's not really a true driver, it seems, at 5-on-5. And, this is kind of surface level data. Maybe if we dug into more micro stats that, if you look at transition and things of that nature, that maybe it would paint a different picture. But I think sometimes micro stats and player tracking and things like that can kind of obscure a little bit the overall picture. If you're getting a certain result, regardless of how it's being achieved, the result is what matters. And you could argue, you could say, if you're a different team, hey, these are the micro stats. Here's how he's able to transition the puck, enter the zone. If we plug that into our structure, the on-ice results will be good. But David Pastrnak has arguably been in the best structure possible in the NHL the last 3 years, playing on the perfection line in Boston. And so if his isolated individual impact is that lackluster, I don't think I would go as far as to say that he would make the Ducks a contender. His power play ability that I started off with, his lethal shot and his exceptional play there, I think that would make a dramatic difference for the Ducks, because right now the Ducks don't have they don't have something to fall back on. They don't have an excellent 5-on-5 game. They don't have a dominant power play. They don't have that thing that you can point to and say they can do that very well. And so if they had David Pastrnak right now, then you could say, okay, the Anaheim Ducks are a team where if you put them on the power play, you might be in trouble. And that could make them a much more interesting team in the playoff picture. But I don't think he elevates them quite to that Stanley Cup contender level. Agree or disagree?
I agree with your premise that he doesn't raise them to the Stanley Cup contender level. One of the things actually I'm going to disagree with a little bit, and this is mainly just kind of looking at goals above replacement, and now actually on your screen, everyone out there watching the video version of this, you will now see Evolving Hockey's goals above replacement data for both David Pastrnak and then the person who he would have been drafted instead of, in Nick Ritchie. And I think that is a good comparison, because that's the exact swap that would have happened there. And at even strength offense, 19-20, 11.5 goals above replacement. 18-19, 9.3. 17-18, 8.9. Now, granted, goals above replacement is more so about what he actually did, not so much looking at expected goal data, and so maybe you might be right there. But in terms of actually what he produced, and assuming that he could replicate that shooting percentage in Anaheim, he makes them a fair amount better, by the tune of 19-20. Nick Ritchie was a 1.3 goals above replacement. When you factor in everything from offense and penalty drive or penalties and everything like that, David Pastrnak in 19-20, 17.8. So he would have basically amounted to about 10 plus more goals over the course of the season. And I think putting it in that context is key for Ducks fans out there, that above a replacement level player, he would attribute 10 more goals than that.
Well, so what would we call a win? How many goals do you think it is for a win on average? Two or three?
Yeah, it's about 3. So per this model, it would be about 3.2 wins above replacement. So he would have gotten the Ducks 3 more wins.
Yeah, and I feel like, without knowing much of the context of this statistic, that seems like it would be significant.
Yeah.
it also shows how one single player can't necessarily elevate a team into contention unless you're a Crosby, McDavid, Ovechkin kind of
Yep,
realm.
exactly.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think he might be one of those guys who's kind of pushing the limits of expected goal models because his production just completely obliterates the expected numbers
So here,
over time.
Tony in our Twitch chat has added, and by the way, I want to give a shout out. Bring us the dingus, resubscribe for 21 months to
Wow,
the Twitch chat. So thank you so
Hall
much.
of
And
Famer.
added, does this mean I can drink now? Yes. Go ahead and drink. Have yourself a beer like Felix is.
I am
I'm on the other
Modelo.
hand having water because I've eaten very poorly over the last couple days. And then Tony also resubscribed for 16 months and said Vezina for Silverberg. So there you go. Noted Silverberg fan. So, but Tony had a question saying, what about drafting David Pastrnak instead of Nick Ritchie and then also keeping Shea Theodore? Does that put the Ducks into contention mode? That is, I think, a different equation then.
Much closer.
Yeah.
Much closer. I mean, I think that if you factor in Shea Theodore and just Shea Theodore, like, kind of exploring that one for a little bit, Shea Theodore makes the Ducks a better 5-on-5 team if you just look at what he's become in Vegas. And I think that he is a driver in Vegas. He drives their 5-on-5 play. He's not necessarily because there's this thought out there that, well, maybe Theodore wouldn't have panned out this way had he remained in Anaheim. And you can't prove something that hasn't happened. You can't prove it or disprove it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But in Vegas, what he's done at a young age is become a guy who drives play, and those guys are pretty rare. And I think that if he can do that, it means he could probably done it anywhere. And put him on Anaheim, all of a sudden you've got at least 2 to 3 play driving defensemen in any order of Fowler, Lindholm, and Theodore on the ice at any given moment. So you're controlling the shot clock, you're controlling 5-on-5 play, and then on top of that, you have a sniper up front in David Pastrnak who can kind of rejuvenate Ryan Getzlaf's, just assist numbers and things of that nature. And you're looking at a pretty interesting team there, especially with John Gibson playing in a better environment with Shea Theodore controlling play out there, taking some of the pressure off of a Lindholm, a Fowler. Yeah, I think Tony is right on the money there. Where if you introduce Theodore into that environment along with David Pastrnak, the Ducks are a pretty interesting team, like I said.
Yeah. And then really quick, want to give a shout out, seeing as we had just done it to the other two people who resubbed. A few seconds ago, Lewis X209 resubbed for 24 months.
Oh, 24.
So thank you.
2 years. 2 full years.
Yeah.
Also, the same amount of Stanley Cup banners hanging in the Bell Center. Just want to point that out.
Wow.
Just
Wow.
Just want to point that out.
Okay, now bring us the dingus, Parker. Go ahead and drink now.
Yep, there's your Habs mention.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Anything else you wanted to add on this Pastrnak kind of hypothetical topic?
No, I think kind of going through that little thought process right now, looking at goals above replacement, I think it's really telling about what can happen. And I think 3 wins from a singular player it's pretty significant actually when you look at it. And I mean, 3 wins. I mean, let me really quickly pull up the standings from this past season, but that's going to be 6 points, and so that would have put the Ducks, I think, a little bit closer. Maybe they wouldn't have been in the mix completely for the playoffs, but they would have been a little bit tighter this past season had that been the case.
Sure.
And so let me see. So the Ducks ended the season with 67 points in the Western Conference. They were technically the first team out. Yeah, they would have if they would have won 3 more games. So they would have ended up with, if my math is right, my brain hurts from doing math so much right now, but they would have ended with 73 points. And so they would have been right in the mix because Chicago got in with 72 points in 70 games. And so the points percentage may have kept them out, but they would have been right there.
Okay, well, how about this? So Shea Theodore, 6.4 goals above replacement this past season.
Yep, exactly.
So they would have been a playoff team or close to it.
Mm-hmm. So
if the math holds up there, yeah. So things could have been different, but we could go on and on about that. All 31 teams have a story like that. And unfortunately for the Ducks, it's kind of been laid bare in these playoffs with Vegas advancing to the conference final and Shea Theodore looking great. But it is what it is at this point. I think that I am close to retiring this topic
Yep.
just because it's become so we've talked about it so much, and I think it's become cool to bring it up, in the mainstream. And maybe I'm a hipster at heart. Maybe when something becomes mainstream, I move off of it.
You definitely are.
Either way,
Don't even say may. You are.
either way, we got to move on from that at some
Yeah.
point. We
Yep.
got to. There's another expansion draft to be possibly ruined.
Yep.
So let's just focus on that for now. Let's move on to a next question. So Eric Stites at Ducks Juggernaut asks on Twitter,
Formerly of Anaheim Calling, good buddy of ours.
Hall of Famer at Anaheim Calling asks, when the season finally begins, will Anaheim have an advantage or disadvantage from the extended offseason of 9+ months? I'm curious how the teams that didn't participate in the bubble will look early, especially if the season is shortened. So, a lot to unpack there because we don't really know yet what the structure of these games will even look like. I think I'm hearing things that there will be different bubbles for regions.
That's kind of
So
that's what I saw. I saw someone reporting that may be the case, but it's all kind of up in the air. That they may do that to start the season and then eventually get teams back into their home stadiums. It may be December, it may be January. They don't really know as of right now, and they're kind of exploring all options to see how it's going to be. And to be honest, I think the NHL deserves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this moving forward with how they set up these bubbles and how they work these bubbles and really put in priority player safety and health throughout all of this. And so I think that, to be honest, the NHL has kind of my trust right now to be able to do the right thing with setting this up for everyone's health and safety. And so it sounds like the bubble, like you said, maybe how they go, maybe they don't, but it's kind of up in the air. I think that the bubble would be the smart thing to do to start at least.
we just don't know. I mean, the NFL is pulling it off with no bubble.
Yep.
I mean, things have gone really well so far.
Baseball's pulling it off also. I mean, to
Yeah, I
varying
mean,
degrees of success.
baseball, I think it started off pretty rocky, but it seems you haven't heard much about it. There's been some incidents here and there, but I think overall, what sports are showing is that this is doable. This is something that's possible, and so I'm going to operate under the assumption that when the NHL returns, it's just going to be in arenas with standard travel. I don't think the bubble is just such an endeavor that I don't know that they're willing to take on, for different regions. But we'll see. I mean, it's so hard to predict a few months out. How will it affect the Ducks, though? So I think that what these playoffs showed, especially if you look at the Stanley Cup qualifying round, was that it doesn't really matter. These are the best hockey players on the planet by a significant margin, and you put them out there best on best. Of course, it's not going to be playoff intensity. It's going to be regular season, but they're going to come out healthy, rested, guns a-blazing. Maybe there'll be some more injuries early on, but I don't predict a scenario where it's going to affect them negatively. I think maybe systems will be a little more, disorganized, that the team play might be a little more up and down, but I think the players are going to come out firing. I just think back to that first game I watched in the bubble, which I think was the very first game of the bubble,
Yeah.
Rangers Carolina, where guys were just looking to take each other's heads off. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to see. These players, think about all the players right now that have been watching from home for the last few months that have not been able to participate in the postseason at all. I mean, it's really just 7 teams, but they must be chomping at the bit to get back in there and show what they can do. So I don't think it's going to have this big negative effect. I think it's going to make for really good hockey early on.
Do you think if it's not going to have a negative effect, do you think they'll have an advantage?
I don't think it's an advantage
I
or a
don't either.
disadvantage. Yeah, I just think they're going to come out good. They're going to be rested. There may be kind of a bit of a drop off after that, kind of a bit how we saw in the qualifying round. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to have this big impact. Also, there's the possibility of the season being shortened. Who knows? I mean, it's purely speculative at this point.
And here's how I view it. I think that maybe a team like the Ducks would have an advantage over a team like Dallas.
Hmm.
But if you're
Yeah,
trying, or maybe even Vegas, who went deep, but if you're trying to compare them to, I don't know, let's say Chicago or Edmonton, teams
yeah,
that didn't make it that far in the playoffs, I mean, Chicago, Edmonton barely played at all. To be honest, they played. It went what, 4 games, right? Was it 4 or 5?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It was 5 games. Yeah,
5 games, and then Chicago got swept, or no, they won one, right?
or it might have been 4 games.
I
Whatever.
don't
That
remember.
I don't
It
remember.
it,
Yeah,
it, it was so long ago.
Chicago won 1 game. Yes.
Chicago won 1 game, so they
Mhm.
played for like 2 or 3 weeks. So in reality, are those 2 or 3 weeks going to mess with their rest and their
No.
bodies? No. So I think maybe you could make the argument maybe it's an advantage for Anaheim versus the teams that went late, but that's the same every year. It's no
Hmm.
different than a regular playoffs where the teams that make the cup final are usually in a tough spot at the start of the season because of how much they played.
Hmm. Yeah. No, yeah, and that's the thing, and I think that for the Ducks, they have so much to prove next season. They have so much to get right, and you could say that for every team that didn't get invited to the bubble. I mean, look at Ottawa, San Jose, LA, these teams, Buffalo. They want to prove that that they can actually be a part of whatever it's going to be next time around. That you hate to be that team that stays at home, and so I think that especially for the Ducks, we've talked about this, all off season that they have to establish an identity. They have to get back out there and get back to some level of competitiveness. So it's going to be really intense right from the first puck drop.
Yeah, and one other thing, kind of talking about the NHL and what they're going to be doing. I was curious if there had been any word on the AHL because that is also of importance. We're talking about there's a couple of guys from the Ducks that or for the Ducks' future that probably will be in the AHL. Trevor Zegras probably is going to have some time in the AHL this upcoming year. Whoever the Ducks end up taking with their sixth overall pick may
Hmm.
be eligible to be going to the AHL depending on who they end up taking and where he's from.
Hmm.
And the AHL, so this was granted back on July 30th. So there's been a fair amount of time that has passed, but they said they're targeting December 4th. And
Uh-huh.
there has not been an update to that as of yet. So I would assume that probably the AHL will begin around the same time as the NHL. They probably were targeting an earlier date, but it seems like if the NHL has decided early December isn't when they're starting, I would assume that the AHL will follow suit.
Yeah, and that is going to matter for the Ducks, like you said, because of guys that probably are going to need some time down there. So that is going to be something to monitor. Do you have anything else to add to this topic? In terms of the rust factor or kind of just how
No,
the team's going to look out of the
No,
gate?
I mean, I'm really curious to see what it's going to do for. I mean, the only advantage that you could have is any guys that were injured. I think a guy like Getzloff could end up being, could benefit from this extended off season because you're able to really get your body in shape that you need. Because typically, off seasons, yes, they feel long, but as a player, you kind of take that time, you rest, you relax, and then you eventually get your body back into shape. And now you have more and more time to get your body into top form and get yourself really, really going. And I really think that the extra time off could benefit a guy like Ryan Getzloff. I mean, we saw it granted a little bit of a different scenario, but when Teemu Selanne the 0405 lockout, he used that year to get knee surgery. Potentially was going to retire if he didn't,
Hmm.
but having that year off allowed him to get reconstructive knee surgery, came back 0506, and kind of the rest is history with how he finished his career with the Ducks from then on. And so having that time off as you're later in your career could allow you to have a little bit of a better season because of the rest factor for him. So I
Hmm.
think a guy like Getzloff could benefit from this. I'm not sure how it's going to affect the younger guys. They may be really chomping at the bits to get back in. I mean, think about Trevor Zegras, for instance. He signed his NHL contract, was potentially going to be playing in the AHL that next weekend, and now he's been off for what, 6+ months now,
Yep.
and in a typical time would be going into his would have just finished rookie camp, would be in training camp right now, in his first NHL training camp, getting some preseason games, potentially trying to earn a spot for opening night. And now
Hmm.
instead it's kind of him really trying to keep himself in shape, add muscle. I mean, also guys like that, I guess maybe you could look at it. And I believe I saw an interview with him, or I saw someone put out there that with Trevor Zegras, or no, it wasn't Zegras. It was actually something about Jamie Drysdale, but the concept still applies of using this off season to really add muscle to your frame. Similar with Getzlaf, you can use the extra time to really get in the weight room. And a guy like Zegras is a guy that probably could use a little bit of added muscle. Same thing with even like a guy like Troy Terry. And so use the extra time for your advantage. Add that extra muscle. Add that extra kind of little bit that you need. And I think that hopefully that ends up happening.
Yeah. The other guy is John Gibson.
True.
John Gibson, at his relatively young age, has already a ton of miles on his body. He's been playing in either meaningful hockey games or playing big minutes for his team since, I mean, he was a teenager basically. And so for him to get this extended time off, especially with the injuries he sustained in the past few years, I think that he might have a vintage season next year. I think that if there's because you see with goalies, I mean, we saw with Carey Price in these playoffs, in the qualifying round and the first round, a rested goalie can be a dangerous goalie. And I think for the Ducks, I mean, it's the same thing with the Canadians. You know, we don't know. I mean, there was an article released by Eric Stevens about, you know, Ryan Miller's future in Anaheim and how he's juggling his options. You know, Anaheim or bust is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And he's not sure about what next season is going to look like. And the Ducks I think they need to move on from Ryan Miller.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
I mean, he's 40. First off, he's 40.
Well, yeah, it's still a hot take that they need to move on from him.
Here's my reasoning.
Go for it.
They need to move on from Ryan Miller, not because he's a bad goalie, not because he's the bad teammate or whatever the case may be, but they need a guy who can come in and take not just some of the pressure off of John Gibson, but significant pressure off of John Gibson, because I now more than ever really I'm just digging my feet into the notion that you need a goalie, you need as close to a tandem as you can get while still having a clear starter in the NHL to really maximize your starter, because ultimately you're paying that top starter to perform at his absolute best. I don't think you're paying them to play in 70 games. You're playing them to win you games when they are playing. How do you get there in a position that's so taxing physically? You find ways to rest them as often as possible. And it's not just sitting out morning skate. It's not just skipping practice. It's not resting on the back end of a back-to-back or whatever. It's playing less games, getting down into the 40s. And Ryan Miller, as good as he is, he's a 20 to maybe 30 game backup at this point. And so that's why I think that there's going to be a lot of goalies in the open market this upcoming offseason. There's going to be a lot of guys who are going to get squeezed out because of the flat cap. It's going to be a game of musical chairs. There's going to be guys who are really good who just aren't going to be able to command what they think they're going to be able to because of the amount of guys that are in the pool. And this is a situation that the Ducks, I think, have to pounce on.
Yep. So I was curious. For whatever reason, I thought he had played more games, but you're kind of spot on. 20 to 30 games. He's played 28 in 17-18, 20 in 18-19,
hey,
23 in 19-20.
It's almost like I know what I'm talking about.
It's almost as if. And here's the thing, and this is actually where I think you do have a good point, because on this is 17-18, 928 save percentage. Really, really, really good. 18-19, 912. Still not bad for a backup goalie. Yeah. If you can get a backup goalie with a 912 playing 30 games, I think that's valid. 50-30 split is fine for me for John Gibson. But 1920, 907 save percentage in 23 games.
Ryan Miller, the Ducks goaltending as a whole wasn't good.
No.
This season, and Ryan Miller was a part of that. And I think that gives you the out, right? It gives you the out that his stats have been declining and he's not sure about it to begin with. I think it's just time. You can walk away from this with everybody kind of in a good place without it having to get to a point where he comes out in a season that he wasn't sure about to begin with and maybe gets lit up. You know, it's just not something that you want to see happen.
Yeah, and it seems like the Ducks need to find their backup moving forward, and maybe it is a stopgap situation where the Ducks are finding a guy for a year or two until Lucas Dostal, who both you and I are very, very high on. I think both of us, it was a Patreon episode where we went through this, but I think you and I both almost have him as our third best Ducks prospect, or right in that range.
hmm There's just so many names on the market
Yeah,
this offseason that, and I guess people are going to ask, well, who are these names? So I'll just throw them out. And I'm not anticipating all of these guys to maybe be in Anaheim's crosshairs, but here's the names: Braden Holtby, Corey Crawford, Robin Leonard, although it sounds like he's already locked up by Vegas, Craig Anderson, Jimmy Howard, Matt Murray, Jacob Markstrom, Thomas Greiss, Cam Talbot, Anton Hudobin. I'm thinking Dallas is going to want to bring him back. I don't know.
probably.
Uh, Brian Elliott, Mike Smith is out there. I don't think anyone wants him. Aaron Dell, Keith Kincaid. You can just go down the list, but there's a bunch of guys. There's going to be guys available, and I think if you're Anaheim, I think that what Montreal did, bringing in Jake Allen to spell Carey Price a little bit, I think that's we don't know if that's going to work yet, but I think that that's something to maybe look at and say, hey, we have a guy in John Gibson who's following a similar career arc as Carey Price, who was a star in junior, was a star at the World Juniors, was given a huge role at such a young age, and they have an opportunity to not wait and see John Gibson kind of fade physically and have serious, knee issues, different things like that Price has experienced. And so if you can take some of the pressure off of him now, as opposed to when you absolutely have to, when he's into his 30s, you're buying yourself better years from John Gibson that you're paying him for.
Yeah.
So
Here's a couple names that I think the Ducks could maybe be looking at. And here's the issue: is they're looking at that market. Yes, some of those guys are good. Some of them are in that mix that you would want to get. Matt Murray is an RFA, so I would kind of check him off. But some of the guys will be way out of the Ducks' price range, and a guy like Braden Holtby, Corey Crawford probably is going to re-sign. I mean, Craig Anderson, 39 years old.
yeah.
The players that you kind of have to go down the list a little bit to try to find one, but Brian Elliott may be a guy that you look at. He's 35, kind of on the older end, but played 31 games this past season, maybe could get that same bit. Do the Ducks try to go for Aaron Dell? Linus Olmark's another name at 26, who's a UFA, or let me no, sorry.
He's an
Linus
RFA.
Olmark is a RFA. So, I mean, yes, there are some names out there, but I think the issue that you have is a lot of them aren't really proven. And so I think that, well, yes.
Well, take a chance on a guy, I
Yes.
guess.
Or do you trust Stolars, who's already in your system?
It's a tough one. I mean, I'm fully willing to admit that it's a tough one and that there's not necessarily a guarantee out there. What about, it just depends how much you're willing to pay. How willing are you to open up the checkbook?
Well, and that's an issue the Ducks have. I think we went over this on the Patreon episode. The Ducks don't really have cap space.
Yeah.
And there's an issue. You can't really open your pocketbooks for a backup goalie, and you don't necessarily want to give them a big contract, but the Ducks can really only afford to give a guy about $2 to $3 million before they're going to start getting themselves into real big cap trouble if they want to try to add to this team moving forward. And so that's something to be concerned of. And the other thing that I think neither of us have mentioned yet is the Ducks need to get a goalie signed prior to the expansion draft. One of the expansion draft requirements. So for those of you out there that don't remember, with the expansion draft, not only do you have your protection list, and those are the players that you're protecting, and there are players that are exempt from the expansion draft, but on top of that, you have exposure requirements, which means out of the players exposed, you have to have a certain amount of players that meet these requirements, essentially showing that you are exposing some NHL players. For goalies, that requirement is you have to be exposing a goalie that is under contract for the season after, or is an RFA at least. So you have to have a goalie that's under contract for the 21-22 season, or is an RFA in the summer of 21. The issue the Ducks have, if you look at the goalies, if I'm taking a look, Anthony Stolars is the only expansion draft eligible goalie, I believe. Maybe Ole Eriksson is, but I'm not positive on that. And Stolars is a UFA in 21-22, so they don't have anyone as of right now that would meet that criteria. So maybe they look, or maybe they just simply extend Anthony Stolars for a year and then that's done. But if the Ducks go out and get a backup goalie, they're probably getting one for 2 years.
Yeah, it's funny because Anthony Stolars played one game, and with the goal saved above expected that he posted in that game, He ranks 28th when you don't control for how many games played in the NHL last season. He just 28th in general. So maybe you roll with him. I don't know.
Yeah. And
It's
just
it's
as a heads
tough.
up, I checked. Ole Eriksson is exempt. So here
Okay.
are the Ducks' current goalies that were either under contract previously or are currently under contract. So they're currently considered Ducks players that are expansion draft eligible. You have John Gibson, Anthony Stolarz, Kevin Boyle, Ryan Miller. Kevin Boyle and Ryan Miller are both UFAs right now. Anthony Stolarz is a UFA 2021, so they don't have anyone to meet that expansion draft requirement.
Hmm. Yeah, it's tough also because I think it's really hard to sign goalies out of free agency because you're bringing a guy from one environment into another and you just don't know how they're going to take to that. A guy that I would try to go all in on if I was the Ducks, depending on how the market shakes out, would be Thomas Greiss. Did not have a very good season this past year, but if you look at 18-19, he was top 5 in goals saved above expected. And if you go into the year prior, he's still put up respectable numbers. And so that's one name, off the top of my head.
Cam Talbot's another one that I would potentially take a look at.
Yeah, Cam Talbot. I just think it's
Stay
tough.
away from Mike Smith. Do not touch Mike Smith.
What if the Ducks get Mike Smith? And what if the Ducks get Mike Smith and Bob Murray comes out and says that they did it partly because of his puck moving ability? Do you
Mike
just
Smith is Mike Smith is
rage
30.
quit at that
Mike
point?
Smith is 38.
I just don't know what Mike Smith has done at this point to warrant another contract.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I don't.
Louis Domingue is maybe a guy that's younger that they go after. Maybe that giving him a shot. I don't know. There are some guys on this list, but yeah, if Ryan Miller does get signed, I mean that actually kind of puts the Ducks in a bit more of a bind because you would not expect Miller to take a 2-year deal, and so then you're kind of stuck extending Stolarz for a year.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a story here that's developing the backup goalie position for the Ducks.
We just spent more time on that than I ever expected us to.
You might have to just sign a guy to sign him. Because looking a little deeper into Greiss, I think I oversold how good he was 2 years ago.
100% were.
Or sorry, 3 years ago it would have been. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry about that.
I would say Talbot. Talbot would be the guy I would go for, or
Well,
Domingue.
Talbot was basically on par with Miller last season, except he's significantly younger, and you think, well, maybe you get him on the Ducks and you give him a different role. Who knows? Maybe a little bit of a downgrade there. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it's so hard with goalies. Talbot played 26 games last season. That's. I mean, to me, like this is where financial considerations really come into play because this is going to come down to what you're willing to pay.
One thing we need to remember on this: it was not a full season. So we're talking about 26 games. What is that if you add the extra 10 games? How many more games does he play? So it may be in the 30+ range.
Sure. It's going to be tough. Anyway, we should probably, I mean, unless you have something else you want to say. But,
nope. It's just I had the aha moment about Miller. If he gets signed, it's 1 year, and that really kind of makes it tough on the expansion draft. So I'll be curious if that happens, what they end up doing, if they just randomly acquire going to the expansion draft, having to go and trade for an RFA goalie or something. Will be interesting.
Well, how would you feel if they traded for Matt Murray?
Here's the question. What would it take to get Matt Murray?
I don't think it would take a whole lot, would it?
If it doesn't take a whole lot, then sure. I mean, why not? He's a fine backup.
He's a 26-year-old goalie who probably wants to start somewhere or have a chance at starting somewhere.
So going to the Ducks probably doesn't make sense for him on a personal level, but I mean,
no.
I wouldn't. He's a fine backup. I think that he overperformed in his 2 runs, but in terms of what you would get if he's playing 30 games, you can do a whole lot worse in this league.
You could. I just want a guy. I mean, I think for the Ducks, you have to be targeting a guy who can play a significant amount of games.
I mean, time brings up a good point of just bring up a kid. Doesn't matter. Save some money.
Sure. I mean, just go with the kind of audition approach and just bring in guys.
Do the Ducks bring over Lucas Dostal and just say, screw it. It's time.
I don't think that's the right way to go.
I don't either, but I'm just throwing out ideas here.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, hey, I would be curious to see it. I would be very curious to see it. I'll be curious to watch him in training camp, but I don't think
he's not
that's...
going to be. The only way he goes to training camp is if he's going to be on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He will stay over in Finland unless he's guaranteed a spot.
Well, who knows?
The Finnish season's already started, I believe.
That's true. Yeah, it's not like normal seasons.
Or preseason has, at least. I know that.
They're underway. Okay. Well, let's get into our weekly topics about...
You don't want to... Our good friend Lewis asked, are you prepared to suit up for the Niners if need be?
Oh, yeah, there's other questions. That I just blotted them out from my mind. Sorry.
Yeah.
Specifically, Lewis's question. Look, I'm a 49ers fan. A lot of people know that. It's tough right now. I think the Super Bowl kind of exposed this team a little bit, and being worse right now. That's all I'll say.
Yep. And
am
then,
I prepared to suit up? No.
Fair enough. And then our good friend Chip, totally offside, says, if the Stars win the Cup, should they include Chip's name on it? I believe it's because she's picked the Stars every single round.
She has. She has. Credit to Chip. She's made some shrewd picks throughout these playoffs.
She has.
So I'm just gonna go with yes. Why the hell not?
Chip's name on the cup.
Chip is 4 letters. They can afford 4 more letters, right?
Yeah.
Get her name on there. Get it on there.
We should get hashtag Chips Cup trending. Everyone out there, get do it. Reply to Totally Offsides and say hashtag Chips Cup.
The Dallas hype train wasn't really all there a while ago, and now it's in full force.
Oh, it's in full force. So that's it, though, for the question. So I think now it's time to move on to kind of our weekly segment. And so after we missed last week, we were a little bit busy. We've got something going on. So this is more so going to incorporate just this week, though.
Yeah, exactly. So we can dip into the week before. You know, we can dip into it a little bit, but this is obviously more focused on the week that was. Hero of the week, first segment. For me, it's Anton Khudobin. Is that fair?
Yes, that is 100% fair, and that was one of mine. But sure.
Okay. Did I just steal yours?
I mean, I've got another one. Don't worry.
I'm just gonna go off of Dmitry Filipovic's tweet here. Last 6 games for Anton Khudobin since the start of the Western Conference Final. He's got a .954 save percentage, and this is, I think, before yesterday's game 1. He stopped 45 of 50 high-danger shots, .956 save percentage at 5-on-5, 7.9 goals saved above expected. Anton Khudobin's just good, he's just really good right now anyway.
He's very good right now.
He's a big reason why the Stars are where they are, and the Dallas Stars not only are in the Stanley Cup Final, but right now hold the lead in the Stanley Cup Final, up 1-0
And here's the thing I want to be clear on the Stars, because this is something I put in my weekly the article that was mine this week on them, is that the Stars got there a little bit by smoke and mirrors, but not that much. They had hot goaltending, which propelled them past Vegas.
They've been outscored, haven't they? Something like that?
Well, no, but here's the thing with them is Vegas is an absolute juggernaut in terms of expected goals for percentage. And they're a team that I believe on the season they were close to almost 60% or something like that. Like, they were really, really good throughout the season. And it's not as if Dallas was a slouch. And so in the series, Dallas was only at 48% expected goals for percentage, which against a team like Vegas, that's insanely impressive to me that they were able to pull that off. And when you're able to keep it tight and keep it close at like a team or against a team like Vegas, you're able to get really good goaltending. That's a recipe for success. And especially as you and I have talked about a little bit, I think off air, about Vegas. Maybe they have an issue of having the scoring talent to put the puck in the net to take advantage of their shot attempts and expected goals that they get. So if you're able to have the scoring talent, which the Stars definitely seem to have, especially with Radulov, Sagan, and Ben to a certain extent, and they're getting depth scoring.
Well, Jamie Benn is better than Tyler Sagan.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
No, it's not.
Is it? It seems like a hot take a bit.
No,
but regardless, when you look at Dallas's roster, you look at their top-end talent, they're getting depth scoring, their blue line's really good, and when you add in the fact that Khudobin's playing out of his mind, it makes sense that they're able to make it this far. And so I think credit to them. And so I think that that's a big thing. Is Anton Hudobin was their best player, but it's not as if he's the only reason why they're there. And I think that's an
No,
important point.
but he's just excelled
Oh,
at his position, and to me, he's a hero.
100%.
I'm always pulling for goalies in the playoffs, and he's really just been excellent. So I just want to elaborate a little bit on what was perceived as a hot take a minute ago.
Oh, I wanted to get into my hero, but sure, go for it.
Oh, no, go for it then. Go for it.
So my hero of the week, seeing as you took that one, I'm going to take Braden Point. Braden Point, who is in and out of the Tampa Bay lineup, and with him, Tampa Bay won 4 games. Without him, Tampa Bay lost 2. The common denominator is him, and you look at his performance while he was in there. I mean, this is a guy that was 60% expected goals for percentage, 85% goals for percentage. In all situations, I think he put up. Let me double check really quickly. But he put up 7 points in the 4 games that he played. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Also, only
the
one
best
of those
player on that team.
Only one of those was a secondary assist. Just so you know. I still think Kucherov's probably the best player on that team. I think it's hard to argue that fact, but I think Braden Point is way more of a producer than a lot of people would give him credit for, and he's not the passenger that some people believe he is to Nikita Kucherov. He's a guy that drives play, and I mean, like I said, it's as simple as looking at the wins. And I know that that's an oversimplification at a certain point, and I agree that it's small sample size, but 4 wins with him, 2 losses without, and that shows his impact on the team.
Yeah, if you look at the last 3 years, Point is maybe a little better defensively than Kucherov, but Kucherov is just so excellent. I mean, he's just so elite offensively. And if you look at last season, Kucherov was just a lot better offensively at 5-on-5 at least. So, and then, I mean, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Kucherov is the better power play player. So, yeah, it's still Kucherov to me, but that's, I mean, the Lightning are just such a good example of that. The fact that in order to be true Stanley Cup contenders year over year, hey, there might be some years where you don't win and maybe weird stuff happens, like getting swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round. But you need those elite star level players to have that opportunity year over year to be considered a contender. That's the price of admission, and you can't get there without them.
Maybe another hero of the week then should be Julien Brisebois. You saying that just kind of really made that pop out of my head, that a lot of other teams would have probably overreacted to the situation of getting swept in the first round and say, we don't have it, we need such and such, the core's not good enough.
They brought in Zach Bogosian.
They brought in Zach Bogosian, Pat Maroon, Barclay Goodrow, and Blake Coleman.
Blake Coleman.
Which are peripheral pieces. They didn't do anything to their core, and that is exactly what they should have done.
Those moves kind of appeased the old school crowd of, oh, okay, they got a little nastier. They brought in some cup experience with Pat Maroon. So, I mean, the other thing that's kind of crazy to me with the Lightning is that they're doing all of this without Steven Stamkos.
Yeah.
Who by the way is the captain of the team and is very good. Last time I checked,
very good.
Yeah. So I don't know what to look. I know maybe it's a little inappropriate to ask this because he's hurt, but what's the future for Stamkos in Tampa? Like, what do you do if you're Tampa Bay and you're going through the situation with Stamkos?
Are you trying to start some rumors on this podcast? Some thought process here of is he movable?
This is something I've been kicking around in my head for quite a bit of time now. At least throughout this postseason, because if you look at last season, Steven Stamkos was still an elite player at on the power play. But even last season and the last 3 years, he hasn't been that good at 5-on-5. And he's getting older. His contract isn't the worst because of the way the Lightning are able to just hypnotize players into taking team-friendly deals.
So have him when you're good.
He's got 3 years left on his deal, 4 years left on his deal at $8.5 million at age 30. And he's got a no-move clause, so obviously that makes things a lot more difficult. But does that register with you at all if you're the Lightning, or do you just keep him and just say, screw it, we're just going to roll with him and give him a chance to get healthy.
Yeah, I think that's what they do is kind of let it roll out.
Well, what would you do?
What would
Because I'm pretty confident what they will do, but what would you do in that
what
situation?
what I would do? I mean, their cap structure is set up just so nicely, to be honest. I mean, here's the real thing. They have a lot of money coming off the books this upcoming summer. They currently will have the issue is they don't really have a whole lot of cap space, I guess, now that I look at it. They've only got 5.3 million cap space and their roster is 15 players. So they'll need to add about 6 or 7 players. So, I mean, someone's gonna, and especially Mikhail Sergachev is an RFA. So, I mean, maybe you do look at moving him. Maybe you look at moving him. I mean, they're going to either have to move him, Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson, or Alex Killorn.
Exactly. I think it's probably going to be one of those names you just put out there instead of Stamkos, because Stamkos is the full no move. And who knows how that affects the locker room. It seems like he's really beloved within the Tampa Bay locker room, and maybe you don't want to upset that by trading out the captain. Who's been such an established figure for your franchise. But to me, if I'm looking at it just coldly, just no consideration for all that, just pure logic, I would look into trading him because they're in the Stanley Cup final without him. They may very well win it without him, and they haven't really looked much worse for wear. You maybe hearing, with Point hobbled now, maybe that they could use him, but I would look into it.
Yeah,
why not?
I agree.
The thing that the Lightning are kind of lacking, in my opinion, is good future assets. They don't really have kind of that next prospect, it seems like, coming through the system. And I think that this might be a good time to replenish that. And if you get a Stamkos moved, you're going to get some interesting pieces in return if you play it right.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, their cap structure, actually, now that I really take a deep look at it, there are actually some deals on this cap sheet that aren't fantastic. Ryan McDonough, not good for how long that is. Andre Vasilevsky,
well, you've never liked that.
No, that's fair. I think I forgot that it was 9.5.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that they could. It just seems like a freebie for them to move off of Stamkos.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And Ryan McDonough is not even that good anymore. So
he's been pretty good. He was really good in game 1. I'll give him that.
He was, but I'm just saying more from a big picture perspective. If you look at his impact at 5-on-5, it's not. It's kind of a legacy contract. I mean, he's still a good defensive player. I will give him that, but I don't know if he's necessarily a driver. Okay, let's move on to our next. I like how this just became a big picture of the of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Zero of the week. Who do you got?
Zero of the week. Who's yours? Let's go with that.
Okay, just throwing it right back. I see. Throwing it right back. The St. Louis Blues. This is an easy one. What are the St. Louis Blues doing exactly? Can anyone explain that to me? They gave Justin Falk a contract that, I mean, unless I missed Justin Falk being a top flight defenseman throughout his whole career, I don't know really what he did to deserve 7 years.
So okay,
with the $6.5 million cap.
So this is not a zero of the past week. This is a zero from
no.
Months ago.
Well, the reason they're a zero of the week is because of the following: the Alex Pietrangelo situation, which was brought to light this past week. So let me just pull up the tweet here really quickly. So the Blues' current offer to Alex Pietrangelo is $7.7 million AAV. Now, if you look at Evolving Hockey's contract projections tool, he's in the $9.8 million range a year. But
he's going to get paid.
The Blues have asked Pietrangelo to accept the AAV without knowing the structure of the deal, without knowing the term, without knowing the details. How does that make any sense? He's your best defenseman. Maybe some people think Parayko is their best defenseman, but he is one of the engines of that team. And you're basically asking him to go out into UFA at this point. So to me, that's a zero of the week, not only because of the way they're handling it with such a really good player, but also because the reason they're in this situation is because of all these horrible moves that they've made to get themselves here. I started off with the Falk contract. I just don't really understand. They're basically cutting their window short at this point. They didn't look good in the playoffs. There's still talent on this roster, but if they're just going to hunker down on, Marco Scandella with his 4-year extension and the Falk deal, and they're going to cut Pietrangelo, they're not going to be very good next season and moving forward.
Yeah. Okay.
They're
So
my they're my big zero of the
full
week.
disclosure here, I actually didn't have a zero of the week fully laid out. I was more so thinking about on ice play, but your mention of a trade or, well, rumor type of situation got me thinking. Here's my zero of the week: Mark Bergevin.
Oh, come on.
I'm giving him the zero of the week for trading a pick for a guy that he could have just had in a couple weeks for the same type of thing, and then signing him he traded a 5th round pick for Joel Edmondson, then gave Edmondson a 4-year deal at $3.5 million a year.
Why do you have to do this to me right now?
And it's almost as if Mark Bergevin didn't learn from giving Carl Alsner his contract. Now, granted, I'll say this. Joel Edmondson is probably maybe a little bit better than Carl Alsner. Definitely paid less, so it's going to hurt less and not be as bad moving forward. But we are in a flat cap world, so that does change some things in terms of value. So
it's a terrible move.
It's a really bad move.
It's a terrible move.
And so I'm gonna go with that. And I mean, we could
That's messed up.
Sorry, I mean
that's messed up.
I had to. Sorry.
I was having a great time on this pod until now.
Well,
you just had to twist the knife a little bit.
Hey,
it's fine.
I looked at Trade Tracker and that one popped up and I was like, oh yeah, that's a zero. There we go. Found it.
Okay.
Found it live, everyone.
Can we move on?
Sure.
Can we move on? Okay. One guy who is not the zero of the week, who is the winner of my former Duck Spotlight category of the week, Daniel Sprong. Remember him? Does anyone remember him?
You did. You went there. There were so many other options.
Hey, well, more for you, right?
Sure.
Daniel Sprong, 2-year extension with the Washington Capitals. How about that? And he's on a one-way deal for the next 2 years. The salary itself isn't very rich. It's $700,000 a year, $750,000 in year 2. But he's on a one-way deal. He's going to be paid the same wherever he is, which indicates he's going to get a shot. I think for Washington, it makes a lot of sense because they're in a very strange cap situation. They have to re-sign Ovechkin next summer, and there's rumors that he's asking for $12 million, which is kind of nuts. Yeah, Jake just kind of buckled there a little bit.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah, he's asking for $12 million. And look, wow. Alex Ovechkin deserves everything he gets. And if you're the Washington Capitals, I would just give him his money and just let him chase Gretzky for the next few years and kind of have that be your identity and just worry about the future later. But back to Daniel Sprong, I think that, look, Daniel Sprong has this really bad rap around the NHL, or at least he's had it, and I don't think it's backed up by evidence. If you look at the last couple of years with Anaheim, he put up some decent numbers, underlying numbers. He was defensively, especially last season when he was called up, from San Diego. I thought that he looked good defensively. He was involved physically, maybe sometimes too much, really trying to drive home the fact that he was a new kind of player, but he's got an offensive touch that few players have. He's too good for the AHL, and I think that this is a really good kind of flyer move for the Capitals.
Do you think Peter Laviolette is good for him?
I don't know if Peter Laviolette's good for anyone at this point.
Fair enough. Shots fired.
I don't really know why the Capitals went that route, but that's what the NHL is, right? It's just recycling coaches over and over. I don't think they'll get along, but I think management has they re-signed the guy, and they re-signed him to a contract that, although the money isn't there, I think that there's signals within it that they at least want to see what they have in him. And so I think that with Daniel Sprong, I'm just happy for the guy. I think he's a good hockey player. I think he's been a good hockey player at every level he's played at. There were definitely some red flags, even statistically, in his game on Pittsburgh. I don't think he was good defensively then, but I think he has turned a corner in that regard. And I think that if the Capitals give him a legit shot, I think he will take advantage of it and become the player that we've thought he would be. So there you go. Good for
Yep.
Daniel Sprong.
All right. Former Duck Spotlight of the Week. I mean, let's just go with all the guys in the Cup final, seeing as there are 3 that I can. Oh no, 4. 4. There we go. 4 that I can think of in the Cup final. You have Anton Hudobin.
Are you including Luke Shen?
Oh wow, 5. 5. There's 5 of them, guys. And now I'm trying to think. Are there any other ones that I'm not thinking about right now that I'm missing, that I'm forgetting about? Maybe.
Luke Shen, Pat Maroon,
Anton
Corey Perry.
Hudobin,
Yeah.
and Andrew Cogliano.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've already shown a spotlight on Hudobin. But you know what? Let's just go with Corey Perry. Corey Perry's in the Stanley Cup final. Let me ask you this question. It's something kind of, some people in Twitch chat. By the way, people in our Twitch chat, once we get through kind of our standard stuff, we're going to have a little bit of randomness at the end of the show, and we'll get into some of your questions if you've got some stuff for us. I've already seen something that will be perfect for the randomness portion of this episode. But someone asked, where do you think Corey Perry will go after this year? And kind of, I'm going to add to that. Do you think if they win the Cup, he retires?
I think he will.
Yeah, I'm in that boat where if Dallas wins the Stanley Cup, I think Corey Perry is going to retire.
Well, he should. He's getting paid anyway. He doesn't have to put his body on the line anymore to get paid. The Ducks are going to be paying him for the next 2 years to not be on the Anaheim Ducks. So I think he should hang him up. I think it's been a tough road for him physically. He is 35, so it's not like he's that high up in age. He's not 40, but I think that if he wins, he could go out on top and not have to deal with kind of the back end that can get a little nasty, with possible more injuries or the physical difficulties, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So here's another thing I would add on Perry, though. I don't know, we talk a lot about Perry is still good. If you look into some of the 5-on-5 numbers, if you look at RAPM on Evolving Hockey, he might actually not be that great anymore. The Perry still good thing might have to be retired a little bit.
No, it's never getting retired. Now it's just it's going to continue to be said just cause now at this point.
Okay.
Regardless.
Fair enough.
Regardless.
Dedicating yourself to the bit.
Exactly.
I can appreciate that. Do you have a narrative that is good or awful this week?
I actually don't have a narrative right now. So do you? You mentioned, I think, before that you do. So what's your narrative, and I can give my thoughts on it.
I mean, I have a classic. I have a source that it's like a gift. I mean, we've said this so many times, but a gift that keeps on giving. Do you know where I'm going with this?
No, I don't.
Mr. Pierre McGuire. He did it again. He actually did it again. Another quote, basically, that you can't measure.
Oh, I missed this. I guess
the willingness to. Can I just bring it up? Oh yeah. So this was 5 days ago. McGuire on TSN 690 said that the analytics community tries to intimidate when you don't agree with their opinion. Says there is no analytics equation for heart or having the courage to block a 100-mile-an-hour slap shot. His exact words, that's how they do their business. It's intimidation. That's the analytics perspective. If they don't like what you have to say, they attack you rather than trying to have a civilized conversation. So I will say this. There are people within the analytics community, like on Twitter, who maybe could work on that. But there's people like that in all walks of life. It's not unique to analytics, and on top of that, it doesn't actually prove that analytics that they don't have value, or that they don't have that they shouldn't play a significant role in decision making. So here's the reality. When you look at decision making in the NHL, teams get labeled as analytics teams like Carolina or Arizona or whoever, and you have teams that are old school teams, quote unquote, like the Islanders with Lou Lamoriello. The reality is this. Nobody is fully analytics. Nobody's fully eye test. It's all just more tools that you can deploy towards becoming the best possible team, whether it's at the amateur level, the pro level, finding advantages in every possible category. And so why people like Pierre McGuire continue to push this notion that it's one or the other, and that analytics can't possibly have this seat at the table because they don't they don't value certain things. Right. Like there's obviously not an analytic, there's not a statistic for willingness to block a 100-mile-an-hour slap shot, although maybe you could just like at who blocks the most shots. Maybe you could start there. But the point is that that's not a reason to just discount analytics. Numbers are really important. You have to actually know the facts. Analytics help us understand what's going on in front of us.
It's
And
information.
exactly. And if you ignore that, you're really just doing it at your own peril. At this point, if you're ignoring all this information that's out there, both in the public sphere and in proprietary data, you're really just you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So it's really unfortunate because Pierre McGuire has a very prominent voice, obviously as the color commentator for NBC, as probably the most tenured color commentator on NBC Sports, and people listen to that and they really believe it. And I just think it's unhealthy because you don't hear anyone out there saying, "Oh, well, scouting doesn't work," or scouting gets it wrong all the time. You don't hear people bashing scouts. You know, it's okay to be wrong on both sides, right? And I just think that we have to get to a point where we retire this narrative.
And here's actually, yes, it 100% needs to be retired. And the issue that you have is everyone talking about it are all from the viewpoint of old school hockey minds. Maybe the broadcast, instead of having Pierre McGuire, or as a result of having Pierre McGuire, have someone on who's more forward thinking, more analytic thinking, and maybe they can have a conversation. I think that that would be more interesting for everyone out there of going over it so that people then can have the information in front of them and understand, okay, I think a great person for it would be, I was going to say Dimitri, but I think Dimitri may make fun of Pierre too much. But Mike Johnson
Yeah.
would be a great person.
Well, and
Who,
another thing I wanted to add just quickly here is that because I think to the point of analytics can't measure emotion, people that look at analytics don't it's you're not putting yourself in a box. You are still looking at everything else. You're looking at how people work together within an organization. You're looking at guys' habits or practice. Just because you look at numbers to help make your decisions, I don't think that means people just ignore everything else.
well, and
The false dichotomy.
I've said this a bunch of times, I think, on this podcast. People may now have heard this from me a million times. You got to view these like equations. And Hart, and I believe Dallas Aikens actually said this on an interview way back when on TSN Hockey Analytics. But things like Hart, hustle, all these things that people want to say can't be measured, all this different type of stuff. Those are all inputs into these equations. If you have that, and if that actually does matter, those are inputs. Things like puck skills, things like forechecking, things like your system. All of these things are inputs into these equations where the output is having a positive expected goals for percentage. And if that input isn't necessarily that meaningful, then it's not going to have a great impact on that output. And so it's hard to fully know, and I guess maybe this is where you can say maybe they have a point. It's hard to know how much something like Hart has an actual impact, an actual impact on that output, but it could be in there. And so I think that's what I think that's the response is, yes, these stats do measure that. These have an impact on it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I just think it's this false dichotomy. It's this false narrative to push the idea that if you look at analytics, you just don't look at anything else. And that's just not true because everything is part of the equation, like you said. If a guy really cares, if a guy's really trying, a manager will notice that and maybe give that guy a little more leeway or try to get him into a better situation. So it's just a really unhealthy dialogue, and I wish it kind of stopped, but we're in 2020 and it's still going, so who knows? To be fair, it's just Pierre McGuire. And last time I checked, every time Pierre McGuire gets interviewed for GM jobs, he doesn't seem to get them. Maybe there's a reason for that. He doesn't seem maybe open-minded. Maybe that's one place to start. Anyway, just putting that out there. Let's get into analytics. Speaking of analytics darling of the week. So who is a player who has stood out to you analytically? Do you want me to give you mine first?
I've got one.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm going to go with, and he's a guy that may be more than an analytics darling because of something he did in game one, but I'm going to go with Jamie Oleksiak. He's a guy that put up expected goals for percentage of 71% in game one, only allowing 0.3 expected goals against, all while playing 16:37 at 5-on-5, which I believe was top. Yes, it was the most minutes out of any Dallas Stars Dallas Stars player at 5-on-5. On top of that, he scored a goal, obviously, but even outside of that goal, he was fantastic for the Dallas.
Mm-hmm. My pick, and this isn't so much analytics based, I will admit. There is an analytical case to be made, but because he plays for the New York Islanders, he just doesn't, he's not necessarily going to shine in this category. A player I've just really gotten to enjoy watching and who played well for the Islanders before they tapped out in the last week in some really hard fought games. Ryan Pulock, he's just a very sound defenseman who's had decent numbers in these playoffs. If you look at kind of his RAPM numbers, where, just isolating for on ice impact in different categories, he's got a strong impact in terms of expected goals against, which is kind of an Islanders thing. He really shuts down shot quality. He also helps generate goals at 5-on-5 and on the power play. And if you just watch him play, he's got a really good sense of moving the puck, kind of when to hold on to it, when to get a quick outlet going, good puck skills in the offensive zone. And his expected goal numbers in the last week were, above break even, not dominant, but he's just a guy who I think I would be very curious to see him in a system that wasn't like the Islanders, where they're so about just keeping things to the outside, and it's okay if we're going to let up all these shot attempts come our way. But he's a guy that I think I had always known was out there and that I enjoyed watching play, but in these playoffs that really came to the forefront. So,
yep,
there you go.
Fair enough.
There you go. Well, that is our last category of the week. I think did you have another topic you wanted to get into?
We got some stuff to get into. We got some questions from the Twitch chat, by the way, everyone listening to this, watching it on YouTube. We do a live stream of the show. You can follow us there. If you hit the follow button, then you'll get notified anytime we go live. Twitch.tv/crashthepond. If you want to help support the show, one way you can do it is there by subscribing. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days. Helps us out more than you can imagine. And so with that, you get special badges next to your name. And if we're on a busier night or something like that, we'll prioritize your question. So if you want to help us out there, just hit that subscribe button. So Lewis X209 had asked earlier on in the night, what show have you been binging lately?
Oh boy. Do I really want to get into this?
I don't even know what this is. So yes, no,
so
maybe.
For those who don't know, a little personal touch here on the pod. I have recently changed living situations, new apartment. I've got roommates again, which I haven't had in a long time, and they tend to watch shows quite often, which I don't usually, and I've joined in. Couple shows that we've watched lately. Well, there's a couple things. There's a movie which I had never watched and a show. So I'll start with the show. It's a show called You. Have you heard of this show?
No, I have not.
It's extremely bad. It's
okay.
It's extremely terrible.
Starting off on a strong foot right now.
It's awful. And it's on Netflix. It's about this guy who just kind of tricks women into falling in love with him, and then basically when it doesn't work out, he either murders them or murders the people around them.
That took a turn.
Yeah, it's just awful. It's just so bad. And then a movie that I saw recently, which I had never seen, $1 Million Baby.
Oh, I haven't seen it actually, but I know it's great.
Very famous movie. I mean, there's so much acting talent in it. The actual plot is fairly, I don't want to call it generic, but it's not like super original. But it was very enjoyable. The acting was good. The camera work, everything was solid. Another show, have you heard of the show Love Island?
I've heard of it.
So one of my roommates is English, and so we watched the UK version just for fun of Love Island, and just awful, just so bad.
Speaking of terrible. The UK, you've watched some Premier League football this weekend.
I have.
What'd you think?
I watched 2 matches, which is a record for me in a long time. I watched the end of Crystal Palace, Manchester United. Obviously, just VAR continuing to ruin the sport there, and then watched a bit of Liverpool and Chelsea.
So you didn't wake up at 4 a.m. like I did this morning to watch Tottenham play Southampton.
You actually did wake up at 4?
I woke up. Well, here's how the morning went. I woke up at 4. Laid on the couch, threw a blanket over me, watched 20 minutes. We were playing typical Mourinho ball, which meant, for anyone out there that doesn't know, Mourinho basically doesn't think there's a midfield. And so every single chance any time that we had a chance, it was just someone from the back line trying to hit it over everyone's head so Son can run onto it. And that made me fall asleep in 20 minutes and woke up every once in a while to keep seeing the scores. And Tottenham ended up winning 5-2. So
yeah,
it was the first half was bad.
Do you want to mention who they played? I feel like that
they played Southampton. They played Southampton, who for whatever reason after halftime they still decided to have a very high line, and Tottenham have some very fast players, and they just kept basically getting behind that high line. And so Son scored 4 goals. Harry Kane had 4 assists on all those goals and scored the 5th goal. And also, just so everyone out there knows, I'm absolutely buzzing on Tottenham right now. Gareth Bale's come home. So for anyone out there listening that obviously, and there's probably a fair amount that don't follow European soccer, the equivalent of this for Ducks fans is Teemu Selanne signing back with the Ducks after the 04-05 lockout and being kind of on the back end of his career, just having come off a bunch of injuries, but coming back to a club that he loves that puts him in a good headspace. And that's where Gareth Bale is at. Gareth Bale went to Madrid, did everything that he could at Madrid. The Spanish media and Spanish fans basically just didn't like him because he had some games that weren't great and basically were super critical. And now he's back at a club that loves him, and we'll see how it goes at 31 years old.
One thing that I've enjoyed watching more soccer is the soccer commentators are so much more critical.
Oh, 100%.
It's almost toxic at times, but it's fun.
I'm wondering if it's a couple different things with that. One thing is you were watching NBC's coverage, right?
I was watching Peacock.
Yeah, so that's NBC's coverage.
Okay, gotcha.
That is NBC's. And so those are NBC's commentators. So I think they maybe because they are international, granted the actual in-stand commentators are actually in England, but maybe that plays a part in it. But I think the other thing is clubs don't have commentators like they do here. It's not as if anyone's employed by that club. And that's partially due to the fact that not all games are shown on TV there. It's actually kind of a funny thing where if you are in the US, you have more access to Premier League games than people do in England. So maybe that's a part of it where you don't have this, you have this separation of commentators from the club. And I mean, you have a lot of times where managers go off on reporters over there because of it. And so maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a balance because if you watch, for example, Sunday Night Football with Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels, they do a really good job of being critical, but also showing that they're enjoying what they're watching. They're always pointing out the positives in the play. They're always, fawning over a great play. And I think maybe the English commentary could maybe benefit from a little bit more of that, because when you're just constantly hearing about how they're not doing things well, it paints a certain picture, and that's how people interpret it. But I kind of enjoy it as a critical person myself. It does have a certain appeal to me.
Yep. But yeah. So absolutely fantastic week for me with Tottenham, though. Very, very happy. One of the first times in a while that I've had a joyful moment from sports.
Wow, has it been that long?
I mean, think about when I would have had the last one. Tottenham and Project Restart was bad. LAFC had a fun little run, but they lost, and they've looked kind of bad in the last little bit. Ducks aren't in the playoffs. Angels are buttercupping me hard by getting just close enough to the playoff race to then lose and be out of the playoff race. So, Tottenham is the only joy I have right now in sports. So let's go with that.
Well, hey, some is better than none.
Yeah.
Some is better than none.
So George had a question saying, when will fans be able to watch live hockey this coming season? When do you think that there will be people in stadium?
I think so.
Yeah. Do you think it will happen right away?
No, I don't think that there's going to be. Well, there might be some states that will allow fans indoors. I mean, if you watch football, there are some stadiums where it's not capacity, but for example, Kansas City had 20,000 fans. And that's outdoors, so it's different. But I think that you are going to see some teams. Dallas.
Yeah.
Dallas is having their watch parties right now at the American Airlines Center.
Yeah.
So I think that we are going to see fans in certain buildings, and I think by the time, we get to February, March, I think that there will be a lot more teams that have fans in the building. And by the time the 2021-2022 season rolls around, I think we'll be close to normal in terms of fans.
Yeah. Oh, I realized I forgot to say what I've watched outside of sports. Last
Didn't answer.
weekend and this weekend, my wife and I decided, because she had never seen the Terminator series, so we watched the very
Oh,
first Terminator last weekend and watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day this past weekend.
nice.
And
Very
then
nice.
also watched it a while ago, but if anyone has Hulu, go watch Palm Springs. It's an absolutely great movie, really fun time. Go watch it.
Hmm.
One of the best movies I think to come out during quarantine, and probably one of the best movies over the past year. Time in our Twitch chat, by the way, is saying Norseman. It's very good per his recommendation.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
All
And
right.
then obviously watching wrestling outside of that for me.
Yeah, really good UFC fight night last night. If you're a UFC fan, some really good memorable moments. I mean, some crazy moments. Crazy moments. To highlight a local fighter, Mackenzie Dern, with a really nice submission. She fights out of Huntington Beach, so want to give a little shout out there. Football. Football is back. Fantasy football. It's doing it again. The emotional roller coaster that
You're
it
getting
is.
screwed. You're getting screwed.
Last weekend had an awesome weekend, did really well, and this weekend doing okay, but it just hurts. It hurts when it doesn't go well.
Is this your therapy for fantasy football right now? Lay it out there. Come on, Felix.
I spent a lot of time this week researching, and I feel mostly good about the decisions I've made, but some of them are not looking so hot right now, like sitting Stephon Diggs and starting Todd Gurley in one league. Todd Gurley did a whole lot of nothing, and I probably should have put Diggs in there, but it's okay. It's okay. We'll get better from this.
I mean,
We'll,
you could be me and be a Saquon Barkley owner, and it looks like he's
yeah,
out for the season, and
yeah,
he was my first round pick. And
yeah.
then
That
also I have George Kittle, who knows how long he's going to be out. So I'm in great shape in fantasy football.
That's true. Well, I'm also in 3 leagues, and somehow I didn't have one player who had these devastating injuries today. So it could
Oh,
be worse. You're right.
yes,
It could be a lot.
it
It
definitely
could be
could
a
be
lot
worse.
worse.
So
But I'm very happy that football is back. I mean, for those who don't know, obviously my top sport is hockey by a very wide margin. But I would say right now, number two might be football, might be the NFL right now.
I'll turn you into a Premier League fan somewhat. We'll see.
Soccer just doesn't.
It's
It,
having your roommate now that watches soccer will help.
I watch it and I enjoy it, but it's not the same. It's just not the same as hockey for me. I don't get like
Oh no, it's not going to pass hockey.
the level of excitement I get, and it doesn't even come. I don't even think it has the same level of excitement as football either. It's just so slow. It's just I think it takes so much time.
It's chess.
Yeah, but I don't want to watch a chess match. I want to watch go. That's why I love hockey, because hockey does you get the chess match, but it happens at a very high
Well,
speed.
yeah, that's why I have hockey first. Soccer
Yeah,
second for me now.
I mean, I still am a big basketball fan, but for everyone knows at this point, probably as a Warriors fan, I don't really have much interest in what's going on. I think the Lakers won tonight, so good for everybody else.
Good.
But
A lot of our
it's
listeners are probably Lakers fans, so they're probably
yeah,
happy about that.
yeah, it's just not. I don't really have as much of an interest this year. Like LeBron, I don't care about his legacy at this
Ooh.
point.
Time just threw in our Twitch chat. Soccer is hockey, but with much better flow. That's not a bad actual statement if you think about
Nope.
it, because it just keeps going and going and going. There's not as
Oh
many
yeah, oh
stoppages,
yeah,
so it's got
because
better flow in that sense. Even
yeah,
when the ball goes out of play, it gets back in so quickly.
because better flow means just kicking it back to your keeper instead of a whistle. I guess is that the argument
You're
here?
building it up for that breakdown.
Nah, sorry. Maybe with more time. I mean, I'm not saying like I dislike soccer. I'm just saying
Hater.
comparing it to the other sports that I enjoy.
Multiple 7-goal games this past weekend in the Premier League.
Yeah, but also some mismatches, some mismatched situations. I don't think we're gonna see that every weekend.
No, we're not. there's going to be a lot. It's going to be very similar. But I mean, Brighton Hove Albion put up a 3-0 on Newcastle today. Leicester won 4-2 today. You had Leeds beating Fulham 4-3. Everton West Brom 5-2. There were some high scoring matches.
I think I prefer watching rugby to soccer.
Too
hot of a take?
I just don't understand rugby. On my honeymoon in Australia, if we have any listeners in Australia, let me know if this is true, but this is what I remember. There's a station, I think it's like Fox Sports Rugby, that's dedicated to only rugby.
Yeah.
And then I think there's also a channel, Fox Sports, like Aussie Rules Football, that's just Aussie Rules Football.
Well, the thing with rugby is more action than soccer.
Well, watching those two back to back, Aussie Rules Football is so much better than rugby.
By the way, just giving a shout out, Golden Road, hazy LAIPA. Very good.
You're copying me again.
Am I?
No, I'm just saying that because I think that one of the last episodes I had a hazy, and you're like, "What is a hazy? What is
someone? I just got provided this, like as we are recording, so I'm just fueled up and ready to go.
There you go.
We could do another podcast, but I think it's time.
I think it's time. We've now done a lot. We're an hour and a half in, roughly.
Are we really?
Roughly an hour and a half in. So for those of you out there, as we said at the top, we are now partnered with Manscaped. Official first kind of pod with ad read will be later on or earlier on in October. But the code is live. So if you want to help support this show, go to manscaped.com. If you've been thinking about it, you've heard ads from other people, seen the ad reads, seen their products. Felix and I can both tell you their product's good. Go to manscaped.com. If you use the code CTP, stands for Crash the Pond, at checkout, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. So
at the risk of losing some people here, if you've been itching to get new grooming products, go check them out.
Wow. But
go check them out.
They're obviously lawnmower 2.0, lawnmower 3.0, great. But even their other products, they've got balms, they've got all these different things to use. They've got a fantastic assortment of products. So go check it out, manscaped.com. Use the code CTP. And
absolutely.
How else can they support the show, Felix?
Bunch of different ways, but I'll give you the main one, patreon.com/crashthepond. Couple of different ways you can support us within that. $1 a month, you get access to our Discord chat where you can chat with us at any time of the day. We can talk about different topics. We talk about breaking news within the NHL. If when the games are happening, we might just get in there and react. Obviously, when the Ducks when they return, what we've done in the past is we'll do live game chats. So basically, we're all in there, kind of like a forum throughout the game. We're just going back and forth on what's happening. And those, I actually miss those a lot because those were a lot of fun. Yeah. And it's a nice little community in there because everybody's just a diehard fan. Everybody just wants to talk about the bigger topics or the niche topics. It doesn't really matter. We just get into everything. And that's for $1 a month. I mean, $1. It's not a whole lot. And you're supporting it. Just you don't even have to join the Discord chat. If you just want to support us, it's $1 a month. But if you want to take it up a notch, $5 a month, you still get access to the chat. You also get access to 2 bonus episodes a month. So if you're a big fan of what we do here on our regular episodes, we do that 2 additional times through this, but we take it up a notch. We go deeper into different topics. If you enjoy the banter of the show, kind of more of the fun moments, and less of the analysis, that's kind of what the Patreon show is about. It's a little more lighthearted, but we also get deeper into some topics. So that's twice a month. And through the Discord chat, we regularly solicit the Discord chat to get topics for that, so you can directly hear what you want to hear talk about, hear discussed. So it's really just a great thing, and it's a really something that goes a long way for us. Obviously this show is a labor of love right now. We talk about Manscaped, but hey, we're doing this show doesn't really pay the bills for Jake and I. It's just something that we do purely because we enjoy it, because we love hockey, because we love talking about the Ducks. So any little thing you can do goes a long way. But even if it's not monetary, there's another way that really helps. If you go to Apple Podcasts, just type in Crash the Pond, brings up our show, and you don't even have to leave a review. You can just scroll down, hit the 5 stars, and that's it. You're done. But if you leave a review, it really helps us climb up the charts. It really helps us get noticed more. and it helps us have more exciting opportunities to make the show bigger, better, and bring it to more people. Of course, we're on different avenues: Spotify, YouTube. YouTube is a big one. A lot of people like to listen to their podcasts in video
YouTube.com,
form.
youtube.com/crash the pond.
Yep. And is there anything else I'm missing here, Jake?
We already went over Twitch.
Yep,
Nope.
Twitch.
Twitch, YouTube, Manscaped, Apple Podcasts. Find us on Spotify also. I know a
Yep.
lot of. I am actually someone who uses Spotify a bunch. So
Yeah,
if you have also
exactly.
migrated over to there, our podcast is on Spotify. Go check us out there.
Yeah, exactly. And also, we do have a website, crashthepond.com. We've got articles every Fridays on this week in the NHL bubble. That is going to be winding down, so we'll be bringing you more content there, and that's also where we post our podcast. You can find us on social media. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. He's got some tweets going up every now and again, various different topics.
There's been a lot of Tottenham tweets this past week. Sorry, everyone. You've had to deal with it.
I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. My Twitter, I would say, is 98% hockey. It's pretty. The split is a lot different, I would say, than yours. Is that fair?
Mine this past week has been maybe like 10 to 20% or 10 to 20% hockey. Probably.
Mine is, on a bad week it'll be 90% hockey, but yeah. So just follow us there. We're constantly, if there's news going on, we're going to be tweeting about it. And also, if you tweet us there, we'll go back and forth with you. I mean, definitely Jake will. Jake, he will go at it with people. If there's a debate brought his way, he's never seen a debate. He didn't feel strongly enough to back down.
I'm like Will Ferrell in Old School.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just lose consciousness and just go for the debate.
Yeah. So hit us up there. That's on Twitter. Crash the Pond is also on Facebook. So if you're someone that's on Facebook and you want to follow us there, that's an easy way to do it. Just search Crash the Pond. So that's going to do it for us this week, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your continued support. And we will talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Bye.